unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, a production of Souls and Liberty, brought to you in part by MyPillow.com. Joining us today in our preview show is none other than the political guru himself, Jim Ellis. Jim is going to be with us all night, tomorrow night, on our extended coverage here at Souls and Liberty, beginning at 6:30 Eastern Time, 5:30 Central Time. Jim, welcome. Got to ask you this, brother. Here we are. Is it the restoration of the Republic? Fight, fight, fight. Is that what looks like it's shaping up to be? Take it away.
It's really still difficult to say. There are a lot of good underlying signs there. The bottom line I can say, Gary, is that Donald Trump today, going into the 2024 election, is in better shape than he was in 2020 and in 2016. So I think from that standpoint, by almost all measurable accounts, he's in better shape today than he was in the previous two elections. And remember, he overperformed what the polling was saying in both of those elections. And if he does that again, I think he wins. Even if he doesn't, he may win. I mean, you've got a lot of pollsters now having him ahead in the national count, which never happened. That never happened before.
Yeah.
And they're talking about Kamala having to win with over like 3 points nationally to carry these states. So I think it honestly looks about as reasonably good as it could for Trump today going into tomorrow. But it's still very close and could go either way.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, you've got trends, you've got indicators, there's all that sort of thing. I mean, the 3-point Harris, I guess you could call it necessary, barrier that she has to get over because of the Electoral College. That's why the Founding Fathers set it up this way, so the will of the majority tyranny wouldn't crush, the smaller folks and the smaller numbers. But there hasn't been a poll, as you know, you and I have talked about this constantly off the air, and I've tracked this like, a scientist tracks a bacteria or something. There has never been a point ever where she has been 3 points or higher ahead in the national polling all the way back to the Joy campaign of August. She's never had a 3-point lead. And as you know, you and I watched, I kept watching. I just texting you and emailing you every day, kept watching that national average of hers lose 0.1 every day until now. It's, you might call it a tie. It depends. I mean, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 for Trump. That trend just deteriorated by 0.1 every single day in the national average. I know that I know we're not running a national campaign, a national election, but for a moment, talk about just that. Why is that aspect important? That the national average either tied or slightly leaning in Trump's favor is a big, bad harbinger for Harris.
Because that's never happened before. And that, remember, and particularly in 2020, Trump was never ahead in any polls.
Yeah.
And now he is ahead in a lot of polls, at least half, maybe more than half. And it's that just hasn't happened before. So he is definitely in a different position. Even his favorability rating is a lot better than it ever has been. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly much better than going into the election in 2016. And really, it was even better in 2020 than it was in 2016. And let's not forget, he won the 2016 election.
Right.
And so, and Gary, as you pointed out, I mean, the Electoral College is all that matters here. And it was a brilliant move to do what the Founding Fathers did when they set that up, because the reason she'll have any kind of a margin on the national vote is because of California and New York.
Right.
And if you take those two states out, Trump wins the popular vote. So, and that's exactly why the Electoral College exists. It's to protect the small states and the rural areas. And that's even when the Founding Fathers knew that would be important in someday in the future, and they were right.
Yeah, they really were years. I mean, imagine if there was no Electoral College in the 21st century. It'd be lights out for anybody who would consider themselves a patriot. Jim, I want to step away, but when I come back, I want to ask you your response to this analysis. Trump may win because he was successful in summoning the farmer patriots and getting them to the polls. We'll be right back. The establishment has tried to assassinate President Trump twice, but we can't really be shocked that those who slaughter 1 million unborn babies each year would try to kill one more human being who stands in the way of their diabolical agenda. Trump, like every one of us, including all of us at Souls and Liberty, is a sinner. But like all of us, he is in the fight and fighting for all of us to get one more chance, maybe a last chance, to save the republic. We must hang together, or as Benjamin Franklin said, we shall hang separately. And maybe far sooner than many imagine, because communists take over and always persecute Christians and Catholics in particular. Let us help you fight these forces of evil. Become a monthly supporter today so we can continue giving you the information, the tools of our faith, and the support network you need to go out and save souls and save our nation. Join our merry band of happy warriors and click below to get into the fight. We need you, we need each other. Join the resistance. Become a monthly donor today. All right, Jim, welcome back. Trump was successful in winning his second term, third, because he was able to get the farmer patriots, those rural patriots, to the polls. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that will be true to a large extent. And the other thing is, I mean, he's doing better with the minorities than he had in the past, too. And I think those two things combined, and depends on the state, will likely be the reasons. It's, his vote among females doesn't look very good. The suburban situation is what it was in 2022. And part of that is the Republicans are making the same mistake they did in 2022. They don't answer the abortion question. And you can't, and particularly, and we're going to see that in the House races more than anywhere, because if you look at the ads around the country that I do, obviously doing what I do for a living, it's all abortion all the time for the Democrats once again. And why are they doing that? Because they had success with it in 2022. Mm-hmm. They did make it a vote driver. One reason it was a vote driver is Republicans didn't answer.
Right.
And they're not doing it again. And I'm astonished by that.
Yeah.
And particularly when you had good examples of how to handle this. And we've talked about this before. Senator Marco Rubio, Governor Mike DeWine took that head on. And Rubio in Florida came out and said his opponent was the extremist on abortion because she's for late-term abortion and against parental consent. And I think that helped blunt a lot of this. Now, why these other people haven't picked that up is way beyond me. And when the other side's got more money, as they clearly do in the House races and the Senate, then you've got to answer that.
Sure.
And you've got to fight back. And they have a way to fight back, but they just don't do it.
Yeah, I think they're terrified of it.
I think that's going to prove to be a fatal error, I think, in the House race.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I think the reason why is because so many of these House races and Republican congressmen, they're kind of like in the Mitch McConnell mode. They're kind of beta males. And, ooh, it's too touchy a subject. The media will say something bad about me. So there really is, I mean, there's an air of that. And it's one of the things that's just so refreshing about having Trump come in. Remember in his debate with Biden and his debate with, Kamala, he brought it up and he said, you're in favor of, killing children after they're born. Flipping A, the rest of the Republican Party should take their cue from that. I mean, that's what it is. And she's like, no. And then I can't remember the Lindsay Davis in the ABC debate with Kamala was like, just for the record, no state allows, blah, blah, blah. And she moved on. 9 states actually allow it. And another, I believe it's 6, cozy right up to it. And it's vague. So, anyway, let's move on from that.
That's their next step. That's their next step, regardless of it's today. That's where they're heading.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, that's what they want. Yeah. There's no pro-abortion crazy who's going to say you can have abortion all the time except for here. They are unlimited, free access all the time. Have as many abortions as you want. We'll pay for them. Hell, we'll even get you pregnant so you can kill them. And we can sell the baby parts. They are off the freaking reservation, out of their minds on the abortion question. Doesn't seem to be resonating as strongly this time. Maybe it's because it's now 2+ years since Dobbs. People, okay, what else? Abortion, yay, for the diehards. But other people, hey, I can't feed my kids, or we've had to draw back, or now we're down to 1 egg a day versus 3, or gas, or on and on and on. For that stuff. But let me switch over to the states. questions if I can. Let's go to the early voting and the mail-in ballots and the registrations. Let's look at them because those are the numbers we've got right now. Let's kind of throw the polls out because even though we're getting most of them in right now, most of them are in Trump's favor. I mean, when you're looking at all these final electoral college vote count prophecies based on polling, I'd say about every 6 out of 7 are Trump. The question is he going to have 287 or 312 or somewhere in between? None of that looks good for her. But let's get into the states here. What state do you think is sort of the most like, wow, I can't believe this is happening in that state for Trump, based on all the early votes coming in?
I don't think there's anyone to that degree. The best ones, if you want to look at historical trends and a change in historical trends, look at North Carolina and Nevada. For the first time in those two states, you've got more Republicans voting early than Democrats. Now, that has never happened before in North Carolina and in Nevada. In fact, Nevada, the latest registration numbers, I know we'll get to that, they have closed to within 9,000 registrations of the Democrats, the Republicans have in Nevada. So I think Nevada looks pretty good. The states that look really good right now for Trump on the early voting, and I think that has been a very good indicator. I don't pay much attention to the polls right now.
Right.
And the information, this Iowa poll, on and on and on.
Right.
There's so much happens in every election the last couple of days, and you just ignore it. You just got to go to the real numbers. And the early vote reports are real numbers. That's the difference. And if you look at the momentum, it appears to be on the Republican side. So I think the 3 best states on early voting right now for Trump are North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada.
Okay.
Georgia is iffy. It looks pretty good. Under the surface, there's some numbers that may not be as good for him. So I think that's a little bit iffy, and so is Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania is a little difficult to analyze because there's no question the Democrats always have more early votes by a lot, like by 2 to 1.
Yeah.
It's not 2 to 1 this time. I mean, they have more early voting. But the Republicans are up 5 points and the Democrats are down a significant number. That, to me, is a really good sign.
Hold up right there, Jim.
But obviously it's iffy because...
Hold up right there on Pennsylvania. I want to ask you more about that. Is there's a difference between intensity and enthusiasm in voting. And I'm not sure that many people make that distinction. Enthusiasm is more broad-based. Intensity, you can have 2 or 3 people who are wildly intense, but it's only 2 or 3 people. You can have, however, people who aren't necessarily intense, but are enthusiastic, and that spreads all over. And it looks to me like, yes, around the issue of abortion, and women are gonna crush the patriarchy, all that stuff, versus the enthusiasm on the part of the Trump camp. Seems to me like the Trump camp is on the verge of carrying the day in that analogy. Your thoughts?
Well, let's look at that Iowa poll that they're making a big deal of, the Selzer and Company poll, and it has been accurate in the past. Mm-hmm. But what isn't being covered, where we see that Harris goes up by 3 in Iowa, and it's just overwhelming from the women, and even the 65-year-old plus women are going like 2 to 1 for her. I can't believe that. That just seems too high. But if you look even on their poll, the enthusiasm was on the Trump side.
Yeah.
Even in Iowa. And they're not mentioning, by the way, Emerson College ran a poll at the same time, actually even later, November 1 and 2. They had Trump up 9 points.
Yeah.
That's how much he's won by in the previous elections.
Right.
So if you want to look at a poll that tracks with Iowa voter history, it's that one, not the not this Ann Selzer poll. Well, she's the greatest pollster in Iowa. She's gotten everything right. And yeah, there's been a lot of accuracy there, but that doesn't mean they can't have an outlier. And I think that's what they've got. But we'll see.
I mean, that's
we'll see. There's no underlying number that supports what she's got, though.
That's a 12-point swing between 2 polls taken at the same time, +9 Trump, -3 Trump. That seems kind of like wild, a double-digit swing inside the same state.
Well, even Selzer, the pollster, said she was surprised by these numbers. So But we'll just have to see what happens. I mean, there's not too much you can do at this point in time either. I'm sure the Trump campaign is aware of this, and I'm sure they've been polling along and know that probably wasn't a real surprise to them, or if it was, that's probably a good sign because they've been on top of that. So we'll just have to see. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that pops up in the last 2 days that usually proves false, and we'll just see what happens this time. But the underlying numbers look good, and he's in better shape today than he was in 2020 and 2016.
Let's pivot back to Pennsylvania if we can and say the voter registration gap between Democrats and Republicans. Correct me if I'm wrong, and going to hand the ball off to you here again, but it used to be 1 million more registered Democrats in the state of Pennsylvania than Republicans. Is that right? And what is the number now, the gap?
And in 2016, when Trump won, the margin was 916,000 more Democrats than Republicans. Now it's 228,000 more Democrats than Republicans. That is a big change. That is a big change.
600,000 and change difference.
Now in 2020, when he lost, it was 565,000. So it had gone the Republicans' way somewhat there. But remember, he only lost by 80,000 votes. And some people on the Democratic side, and people I've had debates with on these shows, have said, well, Pennsylvania is not a move-in state. So there's not a lot of new people moving in there. So these people still exist. They may have changed their registration. They may have moved from Democrat to independent. They're still going to vote the same way. And there may be some truth to that. But they don't need 600,000 people to switch.
Right.
He only lost by 80,000 in 2020. So there's more than enough there for Trump to be able to overcome that 80,000 deficit that he had last time.
Another little interesting.
So we'll just have to see what happens.
I'm sure nobody, Gallup, the Trump or Harris camps or anybody, has gotten much headway while polling the Amish community, which until this election was not a factor. But just to bring the audience up to speed, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, along with state authorities in Pennsylvania, they're big on raiding, they raid for squirrels, they raid for pro-life people, they raid people's houses. Well, they showed up at an Amish farmer's farm who was trying to do, I can't remember what it was, organic farm raising, whatever it was, minding his own business and selling to within his own community. And the government, here come the Nazis, step in, oh, you're not allowed to do that, blah, blah, blah. Well, that has pissed off the Amish community.
Yes.
And all over Amish territory in Pennsylvania, sort of right smack in the heart of Pennsylvania, leaning a little bit to the east, all of that territory now has billboards up in Dutch, which, who in Pennsylvania, besides the Amish, speak Dutch as their primary language. And they are get out and vote for Trump. I mean, that's about 160-ish, 170,000 voters. Now, some of them are children, I get that. But you throw 100,000 people who never voted into the mix, and they're all going to vote for Trump. I don't know. I mean, that's it. This seems to be, I think it's a lot of undercount.
In a close election, all of it. And there's a lot in Ohio, too, and that could affect that Senate race. Trump looks safe in Ohio, but that Senate race is teetering towards Bernie Moreno, the Republican challenger. That could be a factor there. That one's going to be extremely close and is a very important election.
Yeah. So,
that all those things are very important here. And that's the thing, too. Again, let's look at the polling. We saw, I did a study. I ended it on October 19th, but from the time Biden announced that he was getting out, which was July 21, through October 19th, if you looked at the 2020 polls, Biden was ahead at every poll. There were about 30 of them in Pennsylvania, and he was ahead by almost 6 points on average, but he only won by 1.2.
Right.
And, if you see that pattern again, when he's even or up in most of the polls, then he's going to win Pennsylvania if that pattern exists. Now, the Democrats' spin on that is that, the pollsters have corrected from these underpolls on Trump. They figured out how to account for the shy Trump voter, they call them, where someone that will vote for Trump but isn't going to tell a pollster that. I still think there's some of that out there. but they don't. So that's their spin. No, these numbers are already baked into the polling we're seeing now, and that's why he's doing better in the polling in 2024, not because he's gaining more support. And we'll see who's right come Tuesday night.
Well, okay, so here's a measure of that right now, a predictor of that right now. Those are the battleground states, and and that sort of thing. But from what we can tell from early voting and party registration and all of that, are the red states becoming a little more red? Are the blue states becoming a little less blue? And are those purple states starting to hue a little more pinkish? If that's going on kind of nationally across the board, well, that kind of blows their thing of, oh, we've already baked all of this in. Well, if your blue states are not as blue, I think you got a problem.
Well, and they don't mention registration, do they?
No.
In their analysis. Even in California, the Republicans are making some gains.
Yeah.
Now, it's not substantial, but they're not losing anymore. They're actually picking up a little bit, particularly in those 4 House races out there that are Democratic seats that are real critical to the House majority. In all 4, there are more Republicans there today than there were 2 years ago. So that's, when you win by 500 votes in one of the races, the Northern California seat in the Modesto area,
right?
John Duarte, the Republican, he won by about a little over 500 votes. But there's 7,500 more Republicans now in that district than there were in 2022.
Right.
Well, that will help him to a degree, I would think.
Sure.
So, you've seen, I haven't done a national study on registration, but the places that I have, it's much better. Pennsylvania, we already talked about.
Right.
The deficit's only 228,000 versus, like you were saying, most of the time it's been over 1 million. I talked to a former congressman there who can't even believe that.
Yeah. Because
when he was running and served 6 terms there in the House in the Philadelphia area, before retiring, he said, when I was running, there was well over 1 million difference.
Yeah.
So he thinks that's extremely significant, what the registration numbers.
And so, does John Fetterman. So does Senator John Fetterman.
John Fetterman does too.
He was just on the show this weekend, and he's been saying this for a month or a month and a half. He goes, there is a devotion in Pennsylvania to Trump, and you guys are missing it. And
he is, say what you will about him, but I think he's an honest guy, and he says what he really thinks. So, but and I love it. He said, I've been telling the Democrats for months they got a problem here, but and that Trump could win the state. So it's that's significant. Look at Florida, for example.
Right.
In 2018, when Senator Rick Scott first won that seat, remember he defeated an incumbent Democrat at the time, Bill Nelson, who'd been there for a long time.
Right.
And Scott was the sitting governor. But he only won by 10,000 votes out of over 8 million cast. But at that time, there were 257,000 more Democrats than Republicans. The latest count now says there's 1,013,000 more Republicans than Democrats in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, that in 6 years, that's almost unbelievable.
Right.
How it could have changed that fast. Now, Florida is a big move-in state, and you've got a lot of people who wanted to get away from these blue states moving there. But the pollsters missed Florida by 7 points apiece last time on Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis, both of them.
Yep.
And so I think Rick Scott's going to be fine in that Senate race there. But that gives you an example. Now, that's the most extreme example of registration, but it does look better in most states. Nevada, as I mentioned, too. Now they're within 9,000 of the Democrats in Nevada. That's never happened.
Yeah, I mean, the Republican strategy right now, here in this race, but also moving forward, seems to be that I think they were correctly butthurt from 2022. I think they got a little overconfident and red wave. And you can testify that I was one of those when we were doing the show for the midterms.
I tried to tamp you down a little bit on that. And it didn't work.
You did. I actually said to some people when I was talking to them over the weekend, I said, yeah, you know what? Jim Ellis seems a lot more optimistic today than he did in 2022 with me, where he had to put me in chains to keep me down because I thought it was going to happen. And he's like, no, calm down. But one of the things I
Right.
think is very interesting is that the Republican effort, it's really on a state by state level also, has been since 2022. They kind of got together, licked their wounds, some of these various organizations and PACs. They went out and convinced donors, deep pocket donors, that, hey, we're going to put together a plan and this is where we're going to try to do it. And they did it in Louisiana and a couple other places and as a little pilot program, and it worked. And so it got more money in it. And what is the it? The it was to just get so many Republican registrations that you start taking states off the board as being battleground states. I mean, you remember, it wasn't that long ago, Jim, you and I mean, we've done it since we've known each other. Iowa was a battleground state. Ohio was a battleground state. Florida was a battleground state. They're all gone. They're all Republican now. And, it looks like, not quite as dramatically, but it looks like that might be the case with Nevada, as you said. They've drawn to within 9,000 registrations, or that's essentially nothing when it comes to statistics. Arizona looks like it's going to be kind of go back to red. North Carolina would probably get locked down if those early vote numbers come in. I mean, granted, I know this is all premature, but I'm just saying, where's the trend going?
Premature, but trends are good. There are 3 states, actually, that Trump lost last time in 2020, where the gain in Republican registration is bigger than the number of votes that he lost the state. Arizona, Nevada, and New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So the first time New Hampshire, there are more registered Republicans than Democrats. I don't expect that state to flip because Trump has underperformed the Republican numbers in New Hampshire both times, and they just don't like him.
Yeah.
They might elect the Republican governor again, though. But I think those are significant numbers. When your registration numbers are now bigger than the loss of your presidential nominee 4 years ago. I think that's significant. So Arizona, Nevada, New Hampshire are in that situation.
Yeah, it's when you look at a state, for example, like Georgia, what are some of the underlying concerns, and what are some of the positives? Like, still think this looks good. Give us both categories first. Give us the bad news to the degree we can label it as bad. Give us that first in Georgia right now, based on early returns.
Well, Georgia, the reason the state's changing is the increase in the African American population. And that actually Pew Research did a study on that. Why is the African American population growing in Georgia and it's not really growing anywhere else? And the answer is they found that you've got blacks moving into the Atlanta area from other southern states for job opportunities. That was really kind of the underlying reason. And it's been significant. It's a significant growth there, and that's made that state more purple than it used to be a solid Republican state. That's one reason. And then, like a lot of the states there in that region, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, you have a lot of these people from New York and New Jersey and all of these northern states. When they retire, they move down to those areas for better weather and less taxes and the things that why those states are growing.
Maybe they should take note of that about why those states are attractive to them.
And then they continue to vote the way they did before. And that's a lot of the reason. When I lived in North Carolina for 6 years, I always kind of laughed because everybody on my street was from New Jersey except me, and I'm from California. So, I mean, it's just, you just see that in pockets. People, tend to like move together.
Sure.
And that's always been the situation. That's why North Carolina isn't as solid as you would think it would be, because it's all the influx of people, and that happens all the time.
Okay, now go to the positives of why we think those states will end up in Trump's column tomorrow night.
But to me, it's the early voting. I mean, that particularly in North Carolina, that looks good. And the other thing, Harris has pulled her advertising out of North Carolina too, so that's another good sign.
Sure.
And if I'm them, I might do that too, because she's showing some weakness in states that she shouldn't be, like Virginia, even Minnesota. There was a close poll, and then New Hampshire is another one that we mentioned, and that one was giving them a little bit of concern. So if you're her, And I was thinking about that. Why would you cancel $2 million of advertising in the major markets in North Carolina? Well, North Carolina would be a luxury for her. And if she were to come through and win North Carolina, she's going to win the election. It's that simple. North Carolina is the most important state for Trump. And but she has a lot of other ways to win. So if I'm her, you cannot afford to make a mistake in any of these other states that you've got. Otherwise, you negate what you've done in North Carolina, just kind of like going for the big win early.
Right.
It's better to protect what you've got, and because you don't need North Carolina. Yeah. She does not need North Carolina to win. She has plenty of ways to win without it. Mm-hmm. But if she does win it, she probably wins the election. But they may think, well, but we got to protect these other states because we're going to win anyway. That's probably what they were thinking. And if I'm them, I would have done the same thing.
Right. So, Georgia, what are the cons? I'm sorry, what are the pros, the happy news for the Trump camp in Georgia?
Well, more Republicans voting than Democrats. But that has been the pattern in Georgia before. So that's not a new thing. But the fact that their raw number, more Republicans voting early, is good. That's certainly not a bad sign. But some of the other numbers maybe are not as good. The partisan break here, the Democrats, based upon previous Democratic performance, is a little bit up, and the Republicans are a little bit down. And remember, he only lost that state by 11,000 votes last time. So that sort of matters. The biggest thing on early voting that I've seen, and this is nationwide, and it goes back to something you were talking about a few minutes ago, the rural vote is way up everywhere on early voting. And the urban vote is way down everywhere. That might suggest the minority turnout is less enthusiastic about her. And that would be your urban vote. The suburban vote is about parity with 2020, maybe up a point or two.
Right.
But the rural vote's way up. Well, and the urban vote's way down.
That was the analysis at the end of 2020. The analysis was that going into it and coming out of it, lay the steel aside. We're going to talk about election theft in our last segment when we get to it. But right now, laying that aside, it was cast as a city versus rural, urban versus rural thing, and the urbans won. That same analysis being applied today would suggest that the rurals are going to win as we sit here today.
Well, maybe so. I mean, there's still more people in the urbans, and the suburbans, don't forget about them, because they're their own category, and they're up a little bit. But then you look at that urban vote too. I mean, the fact that the urban votes are low around everywhere I've looked, which is almost every major place, suggests that this idea that Trump may be doing better within the minority communities, that seems to bear that out. That seems to give some more foundation that may as well be true, because there's certainly less enthusiasm there for Harris coming out of those cities, and that's got to be a good sign for Trump. I'm sure Harris's camp is very nervous about that.
Sure, yeah, I would think obviously I'm looking at social media in 2016 and the run up to all this. I'm looking at it in 2020. I have never seen, now it might be because Elon took over X, but I have never seen so many black faces on social media feeds.
Oh, that's true.
Damning Harris and praising Trump. I mean, it's off the charts. Occasionally, and just so people know, your feed is all, no, my feed is full of both sides. That's what I have to do as a journalist. I can't sit up here and talk about something. Hey, guess what my feed, which is all Republican, is saying? That's stupid. I look at both sides. I go onto both of them, but I do not remember at all anything like this sort of black support for Trump. Sometimes very colorful. I will add.
Well, it is. Some of these rap artists that have come out for Trump, I mean, that has to concern them greatly. That's a big sign. I mean, they had that Detroit rally, and remember Tommy the Hitman Hearns, the big boxer back, kind of more in our era. The younger people probably don't remember him, but he was a really good boxer.
Yeah.
And he was sort of
gold medalist.
Yeah. He was sort of the antithesis to Mike Tyson at the time, right? He was sort of Mike Tyson's Joe Frazier, Tommy the Hitman Hearns.
Yep.
He comes up, he's at the Trump rally, and they bring him up on stage. I mean, in Detroit, I would think you lived in Detroit for many, many years. He was a big hero in Detroit.
Absolutely.
That's where he was from. And I think that has to be a major thing. That can't hurt Trump with somebody like him saying, I'm for Trump.
No, when you get
Right.
over in Pittsburgh, not that far away from Detroit, obviously different state, but you've got at the rally there, virtual gods of the Pittsburgh Steelers years gone by up
yes.
there on the stage, vote Trump, vote Trump. I mean, you did not see this in 2020. You certainly didn't see it in 2016.
Just some anecdote stuff here. I'm in Las Vegas now, and was at a conference about 3 weeks ago. And I was in one of the Lyft cars, and I had this young African-American driver, and he brought all this up, not me. And I'd say he's right around 30 years old. And he was telling me he had just moved from Austin to Las Vegas because he calculated, doing what he's doing, that he could make more money in Las Vegas than he was in Austin.
Good for him.
And he's also wanted to start two businesses, and he was a real entrepreneurial type of individual. And then he says, I get texts from Kamala Harris every day. And here's the interesting part. And he says, and they know I'm African American. And so it's always that I have to vote for her. And he goes, I'm not doing it. He says, and I thought that was interesting. He goes, I want somebody tough. And Trump is tough. And she's not. Yeah. And he says, I don't care how many texts I get from her, I'm voting for Trump. And that's just one person in one place. But I thought, that's pretty significant, because he fit the profile of what people are saying nationally, that this is the part of the African-American segment, the younger black male who wants to make it. And he clearly does. He was obviously a hard worker, and he's got plans.
Right.
That's the type of person that Trump is attracting. Sure. And there's a lot of them. Yeah. I mean, the African-American community is changing. And I thought this is just one example. You can't base anything based on that, but it does fit what people have been saying.
At some point, all of the polls and the numbers and the digits and the trends, they all have to boil down to individuals. So you can't necessarily reason from an individual up to a trend, but when you have a trend and you see it, in an individual here, an individual there, another individual, all of a sudden the trend seems to have some sort of, meat to it. Jim, we're going to step away real quick, get on our last little break, but when we come back, we want to go to the Alka-Seltzer topic, cheating. We'll be right back.
Go to MyPillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size MyPillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
No matter who wins in November, we have to embrace that we are living in a post-Christendom culture. And the heart of that is a rejection of the gospel. As one item on our agenda to combat this, Souls and Liberty is hosting our first annual retreat at sea. You might be familiar with the annual event we produced for over 10 years at Church Militant. Dr. Jules Gomez, our Rome correspondent, and I are going to be doing the presenting, and the theme is Christians in Exile Triumphing in Adversity, which provides a whole range of discussions to think about. Now, we sail out of Galveston, Texas to the Western Caribbean November 10th to the 17th, yes, right after the election. I think all of us are probably going to need it one way or the other. Please join us for serious discussion, spiritual preparation, and bonding, very important, bonding with fellow Catholics. Registration information is provided below and on our site at soulsandliberty.com/retreat-at-sea 2024. So sign up and we hope to see you there. This is the one area where it's like, oh my, there were a number of videos posted on X over the weekend of dudes rolling up in front of them. I retweeted them or text them or whatever you call it. Guys rolling up, looking around at these kind of deserted boxes and literally stuffing dozens and dozens of ballots into a box. One guy took a selfie of himself in front of the box and then was there texting. I don't know what he was doing, but he committed a federal crime stuffing a ballot box with ballots that aren't his. You're hearing reports of this kind of all over the country. You're hearing reports about the Dominion machines not working correctly. Republicans having to be, stand in line for 5, 6, 7 hours in Pennsylvania because there was only one machine working. Meanwhile, in the Democratic strongholds, there's 25 machines and 16 voters. Yeah. It's one thing after another after another. There's video of people have put up. They're like touching the screen on it. They punch for Donald Trump, and when they do it, it switches to Kamala. All of this, it never goes the other way. You never see Democrats posting, "Oh, look, I tried to vote for Kamala and it made it Trump." So right. I think this is the one area that people are, if you could be. Go ahead.
It's a big concern. It really is. But the bigger concern than all of that is the number of illegals that are on the rolls. And you look at where that's happening. So these states that, they give these illegals driver's license.
Right.
And then that's how you can get on the registration roll. And there's only one state there's actually 24 states that do that.
Yeah.
That give them driver's license, the illegal migrants. And my guess is they probably don't even have to pass a test.
Of course they don't.
Like everybody else does. But if you, there's only one battleground state where they do both. And that's Nevada, where I am right now, where they register by driver's license and you have automatic registration.
Right. That's
the real problem. Now, Pennsylvania, the governor was trying to do that. I'm not sure he succeeded there. He declared by edict that they were doing that, but so the legislature doesn't have any say in that, and Newsom was kind of doing the same thing in California when he was saying, well, we're not going to verify ID this time. Well, really? You can just say that?
Right.
So we'll see what happens. But it just is, I think that's the bigger problem. That's the bigger problem. We had a situation that just went to the Supreme Court in Virginia where they found 12,000 migrants or illegals on the ballot. And, Governor Youngkin got up and said, went to court and said, hey, these people have to come off the registrations because the counties weren't doing it. They weren't eliminating them. Right. And they get the lower court ruling that said, oh, no, it's too late. You have to keep them on. And you actually even had 3 U.S. Supreme Court justices that said that, too. I mean, and they're proven non-citizens.
Right.
So kudos to Governor Youngkin for being able to stop that. He did actually stop that.
But people may not. I mean, I think one of the reasons, Virginia's closer than it certainly was in 16 or 20.
Yes, it is.
It's around, depending on what poll you look at, 3 or 4 points or something. However, something
That's
that
true.
might escape people's attention, or might have gone down the memory hole because there's so much data and information right now, is that Governor Youngkin said, paper ballots, hand counted.
Yes. Yes, we vote by paper in Virginia.
Yeah, you cleaning up your voter rolls and you're doing paper.
Yes.
And it's already close. And when Kamala retreated from North Carolina, she pulled back to Virginia. I mean, there's a lot of places she could put her $2 million, city ad campaign buy money. She could put that anywhere. She put it in Virginia. So what's going on in Virginia that you would pull out of? We know what was going on in North Carolina. You threw in the towel. But Virginia? Why would you, really? With those northern suburbs around D.C. that are so deep blue, they're almost black, and yet you felt the need to go shore up Virginia?
Not a good sign for her. And Governor Youngkin, a friend of mine was an assistant secretary of state under Trump, and she talked to Youngkin himself. And he told her, this is a week and a half ago, that, he goes, I like the trends I'm seeing in Virginia. He said they're identical to what I was seeing for my own race. And so the governor thinks that Trump actually could pull it out in Virginia.
And that's one of those things, like, if, for the viewers' sake here, don't have their heads in this all the time like you and I do. A Trump win in Virginia would be like what a Harris win in North Carolina would have been. I mean, that becomes a
He wins. He wins if he does that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
we'll see if it happens. So.
Are you concerned?
But you're right. In Virginia, we did go back to paper voting. That's where I live, and that's where I voted. So I voted early before I came out here.
Yeah.
And
who'd you vote for?
But you do vote with, you go back to the number 2 pencil, and the pen, and you color in the dot.
That's
like
the way
we
it
used
should
to.
be.
But you do scan it. So as you leave the polling place, they scan it through a machine
Yeah, it's all right.
there. So it doesn't, you don't see, so what you see on the screen is what number you are, how many ballots have been cast.
Right.
So I was like number 2018 in my early voting station.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know what that means because they don't report by early voting station. They just report by county on the early votes.
Right.
So I don't know where we were on that front, but it doesn't pop up like that where you would know. You could see a machine saying, "Oh, I voted for Trump," but it's counting for Kamala. No, you just see it go through.
Right.
But we do fill it out by pencil and paper.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, though, that you've got I mean, if something gets challenged, here's the difference. You have a piece of paper, a physical piece of paper, to now sit down and count and compare it to the machine tabulation. The piece of paper wins in a head-to-head, not the machine.
Yeah.
That's the
difference. Yeah. So it goes into that machine.
Sure.
So it's stored there.
Right.
But yes, you do have the paper confirmation or verification, and some of these other states don't. And that was the big controversy. So we'll see what happens.
Let me ask you this is almost a philosophical question. We'll kind of wrap up with this, but when you have so much, and it might be more it is more Republican, but nonetheless, it's still gigantic numbers across the country of people who are very uncertain and others who sort of flat out just don't trust that the vote outcome is fair and reflective. Not that there was cheating going on. Cheating goes on every election. Question is there enough cheating to flip the results? That's the question.
That's the question.
When you have a lot of people go, you know what? I don't think I trust this. I really don't think I trust this. Trump got blasted in 2020 when they said, hey, are you going to accept the results? And he says, well, if it's a fair election, I will. And they're like, oh, he's a Nazi, he's a dictator, he's a tyrant, blah, 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 blah. Does he overthrow democracy? Well, Jamie Raskin and Harris just both said the same thing last week. Will you accept the results? And they both said, Jamie Raskin, the congressman, crazy, child killing everything congressman, and Harris both said, well, as long as it's a fair election. Okay, well, they say it, and it's, that's reasonable. Trump says it, and of course, it's off the charts.
Yes.
What do you think the fallout is from a substantial minority of voters, talking 35 to 45%, who simply do not accept that the outcome, particularly if it is for Harris, simply do not trust that that's truthful?
I think it's higher than that. There was some study that showed it actually opposite, when only about 35% actually fully trusted the whole system.
They're all Democrats.
And of course, again, you bring up a good point about what the Democrats are starting to say now on the election, because if Harris loses, it's all of a sudden going to be okay and not a crime to contest the election.
Right.
These people are talking about going after all these people, like in Georgia and some of these places that wanted to have an alternative delegate slate back from 2020. We're still talking about that and still trying to charge these people. Well, why is that illegal?
Yeah.
You don't have the right to contest an election or put together some type of alternative slate. Hillary Clinton sure contested the election when she lost. Yeah. And let's go back even to 2004, John Kerry, when he lost to George W. Bush. He was contesting the Iowa vote, and they were trying to contest the Ohio vote and the Ohio electors. That was all okay. And it is okay in a democracy to contest something that you don't think is fair.
Sure.
That was perfectly all right for them to do that. And it was all right for Trump to do it too.
Right.
Not a crime. Not a crime to contest an election if you have evidence.
Yeah.
And how do you get that evidence? 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the other.
Yeah, how do you get it in 2 weeks? I mean, it's.
Yeah, they say, well, his claims are totally false, they've been unproven. Well, when was there a real investigation done of any of this? There wasn't.
Yeah, and the funny thing now is, in the intervening virtually 4 years since that steal, and it is a steal, was a steal. since that time. It was a steal by suppression. The media, suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop story. This, that. 18 of 19 bellwether, counties were wrong. The combinations of state votings were wrong. I mean, please, every single historical precedent, job approval rating, everything across the board was saying that Trump was going to win that. And then all of a sudden, between 3 o'clock and 4:30 in the morning, hundreds of thousands of votes come in mysteriously and everything flips. In unprecedented stuff. I mean, if that wasn't stolen, well, then I'm wearing a green shirt. As we move into this, I mean, what in these 4 years? I mean, we've seen what's been revealed in Arizona. 200,000 people on the voter registration there that were accepted that should not have been counted because they were not in the state. They weren't state residents anymore. You see this kind of across the country. And again, Democrats never seem to come forward in any state and say, oh, look at all these illegal voters. Oh, look at all these dead Republicans voting. Oh, look at all these Republicans voting in 14 different states. Oh, look at all these nursing home Republicans voting 38 times each. You never hear that from them. It's always the cheating on their side.
Yeah, I know. And I'm afraid we're going to have it again. That's why, as you and I have laughed, you have to get beyond the margin of theft.
Yeah.
And that's what, we're going to see anecdotes like that all over the place again, I'm afraid.
Sure. It's going to be a question.
I think it'll be in different places. I think Georgia will be cleaner this time. I mean, they were so over the top with trying to make sure and convince everybody it was a fair election. I think they're going to be pretty tight on everything in Georgia. But you probably have to look at other places. You don't know. You just don't know.
Yeah.
One thing that isn't Pennsylvania, for example, there won't be as many ballot boxes,
right?
Because they use those. Remember, Zuckerberg had contributed all that money to various counties for
nearly $500 million
election administration. $400 million.
Yeah,
$400 million from him, and that's gone.
Right.
Most of the states made that illegal, that you can't contribute to the government. Mm-hmm. And so he didn't do that this time. And from what I understand in Pennsylvania, they're more confident they'll get a fairer vote this time because there are less ballot boxes. So the counties use that the Zucker bucks, as they were calling it,
right,
to fund all that. Because under Pennsylvania law, you have to have it monitored all the time.
Right.
And they don't have the money to do that.
Right.
So most of the counties don't have them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a step forward in Pennsylvania for a more accurate count.
Yeah, it'll be kind of hard to, pull in 800,000 mail-in ballots at 3 o'clock in the morning from all over the state. Like, where are they coming from? So it doesn't mean that they can't already have them printed up and signed, and they're sitting in warehouses right now paying people $100 a day to anything could be going on. But they have to get into the system, and there's an awful lot more eyes on things now than there.
I think, people are aware of this time. I think it's going to be harder to pull that kind of stuff. The bigger problem is who's already on the list, and it becomes a legal ballot. That's your bigger problem.
Right. Yeah. Well, We'll see how this is going. Jim, any closing thoughts here? This is your last time to say something before there are 0 days left. What do you want the audience to know or think about?
It's still really close. I do think it could go either way. I think the Republicans look like they're in pretty good shape in the Senate for at least 51. The House, I'm not sure. It's a tough road. I mean, you've got these at least seven districts, 3 in New York, 4 in California, in the Democrats' strongest states that are held by Republicans. And how many can the Republicans hold on? I wouldn't be shocked to see a very small Democratic majority in the House. But it could go either way, and it could come down to 1 or 2 seats. And it's going to be weeks before we figure that out, I think, because particularly there's so many contested races in the West,
right,
and they take a long time to count the ballots. I mean, California says they verify all these signatures, and they got 17 million mail ballots, so it's going to take a while. And by the way, they don't count every day out there in the post-election period. They're, the next counting day is X. I'm not sure even the Democrats are going to put up with that this time. So Hakeem Jeffries, who would likely be the Speaker of the House if the Democrats win, I don't think he's going to be just sitting back and waiting for the next counting day in California. I think they'll put some pressure on Newsom and everybody to get some counts done. So California might go a little quicker.
Yeah.
But December 13th is their certification deadline. That's the last one in the country. That's the day that the states, every state has a certification deadline, and they have to report to Congress and their state capital who has won the elections.
Right.
And that's so it could be into December before we really know what happened in the House.
Yeah. Well,
because I think it's going to be that close.
we'll see how that goes. All right, Jim, just so everybody knows, viewers know, we're going to be live tomorrow night here on Souls and Liberty, starting at 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central. Little pre-show, chit-chat on stuff. Polls start closing 30 minutes later. We're going to be tracking it throughout the night. Excellent commentary, insightful people. If you've been watching in depth, you know all the sorts of stuff we talk about. Christian patriots, Catholic patriots, charging to save the Republic. Here it comes, Western civilization in the balance, every last bit of it. That's what we're going to be covering, and tomorrow night is it. It's D-Day. We land on the beach. We land on the beach of Fortress Europa. The World War II fans will know exactly what that reference is. We land on the beach, and will we establish a foothold beachhead, or will we get thrown back into the sea? That's what the decision is tomorrow. All right, Jim, thanks very much for being with us. We will see you tomorrow night.
Thank you as always.
See you tomorrow night. God bless you, brother. All right, this closing thought here with 1 day to go. You know, we've been counting this down since almost 120 days here, and people are like, oh my gosh, you're way out. Oh, yeah, because we knew this day was coming, and we wanted to be able to bring you not just good political analysis, which we do, but we wanted to bring you something that is far and above just political analysis and numbers and how's this suburb voting and how's that precinct voting and are there more rurals and urbans and all that. You know, all of this, why does all of this matter? Because now you're in the details that feed up into the giant, larger question of, will the Republic last, or is this it? That's it. One or the other. On the Trump side, nobody on the Trump side who's a Christian, follower of Christ, Catholic, patriot, is saying, oh gosh, look, he's the holiest man around. We're not electing the Pope. Many of you may know why I'm smirking. I'll just move over that. We're not trying to elect somebody holier than the Pope. We're not trying to elect a theocracy. We're not doing any of that. What we're doing is voting in a man who has a team around him who are at least men and women of goodwill, even if their political positions are wrong on what are the most important issues to us. Even if they're, they're not sort of baked into all of that. They don't enjoy a Christian Western civilization, Catholic-built Western civilization worldview. They still get the Western civilization part of it. They get the natural law, at least major parts of it, freedom of speech, that man is made with and then possesses a certain dignity because he's made in the image and likeness of God. Maybe Elon Musk doesn't believe that explicitly, but he sure acts like he does. And he sure talks like he does. So this is what we're fighting for. We're fighting. Why? Because we don't have any religious leaders, Protestant or Catholic. We just don't have them. They're not there. So, they've acquiesced to the culture for decades now. They've passed their collection plate around. They've gotten everything they want. The Catholic bishops, Ken Paxton here in Texas, just accused the Catholic bishops of majorly profiting from the whole immigration disaster. The Catholic leaders and many of the Protestant leaders have been absolute sellouts to this culture. Since the 1960s, they have sold out to it. So if they take themselves off the board and God can't use them, well, who the hell is anybody to say that God shouldn't go over here and use these people? They're men of goodwill, at least, largely, sufficiently. You want to save a republic? You go to war with the army you've got. And most of the Catholics and most of the Protestant religious leaders have sold out. So here's who we have. And people who are Christians and Catholics, Catholics are Christians. Let's keep making the difference between Catholics and Protestants. You don't get to say, oh, they're not holy enough for me. Screw that. That's BS. This is who we've got to fight with. Your children, your grandchildren, do you want them raised in a country, in a generation after generation where this is the kind of prevailing view and you can work on it and you have the opportunity, like the soldiers landing on D-Day, on the beaches in Normandy, have the opportunity to sweep into, Germany, cross the Rhine and win the war? Or do you want to go over here and vote with the other side? It's one or the other. And if you don't vote, you're voting for the other side, because this is the side that needs help. This is the side that needs the mandate, so that it can be influenced, even if it is a minority, it's still a large minority within this camp of Christians, Bible believers, Catholics, devoted to the natural moral law, and rooted in these Western civilization ideas and principles. This must win or it's over. It's that simple. So, vote for Trump is not a vote for the Messiah. It's not a vote for the Savior. It's not a vote for anything. It's the vote to land on the beaches of Normandy and push your way to victory 10, 11 months later. That's what you're voting for. You don't vote, or you vote for these guys, and you got to stand there and account to God when you die. And yeah, that is me saying that. You got to account to God, because this is a love of neighbor question. It's a love of neighbor. Your children are your neighbor. Your grandchildren, they're your neighbor. The people across the street from you are about to lose their job. They just laid off thousands of Ford workers in Michigan. Just laid off thousands of them. What about them? You don't love them? Oh, screw them. I've got my job. Well, why are they doing it? Because of the Harris economy. That's why. So you need to really think about what's going on here. All these little details are feeding into this. Will the Republic survive or will it not? It's just that simple. Coming to you from Houston with 1 day left. Get out and vote, and tune into our coverage tomorrow night, as you see right there on the screen in front of you. Had up for a little bit. It's right here, 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central. We're going to have Jim Ellis, who was just the guest on In Depth earlier today, Trey Trainer, Claver, who's down here in Houston, along with me, Steve Wynn, Arthur Clareau, great people who have been in this every single day. Let's get it all across the finish line, everybody. And let's wrap up with a prayer to the Mother of God. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. You won't see any other coverage tomorrow night praying, as they're also giving you the numbers. God love you.